People talk about it being transformative. Paul, maybe I can start with you. How is cloud transforming organizations?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. This is the longest hype cycle of any radical new trend that I can remember.
Technology.
As you say. But I think at its heart it is transformative and can be a game changer. But it's certainly not the answer to everything. And I think you've got to think about it in the right way. So you shouldn't think about it as somebody else's computer or somebody else's data center. You need to think about it as some services that you can use in your business to accelerate your business. And I think if you think like that, it's a really valuable part of the armory of a CIO.
Absolutely. What about you, Christina? Agree, disagree?
Yeah, I think it is transformative, but I think it's also transformed slightly more maybe the disruptors. And so I think that, with companies who have more legacy technology, we have to do a migration to cloud, which often is difficult, whereas newcomers can come in and take advantage of the cloud much faster. And so I think actually the challenge is for the large corporates who have all the legacy technology, they have to do that migration and how quickly you're able to do that. And so I think it's transformed all, but maybe some have taken advantage more than others.
Bit of an element of you don't want to start from here kind of thing. Yeah. So, yeah. Everyone join a startup quickly. Yeah. What about you, Doug?
Yeah, well, what I've seen in our business before is that where we had individuals that were looking after IT operations side of things, we were looking to move into the cloud. And I think the transformation there was more about the people element and getting them skilled up and moving across into utilizing the cloud. Where we are today at PureGymm, we're finding that actually having been able to move to a brand new website, we decided much early on to go into the cloud, which has enabled us to be able to utilize the features and functionality of that. So what we have done is all of our environments are in the cloud. It's part of my strategy as the CTO to say that we're not going to do on-premise. Therefore, the development domains that we build up against are all in the cloud. Our build servers are all in the cloud, and our deployments, our beta servers and production is in the cloud as well. So it's enabled us to really focus on the development side of things and not have a large IT operations team to have to look after our on-premise servers because we don't have any. And therefore, we're able to have a much smaller IT team really focused on software development and engineering and having just one person that manages our third parties for all of those sort of hygiene factors.
Oh, that's quite a luxury, isn't it, from your point of view?
It is. Being able to have a focused team without those distractions, without having to keep patching servers, it means that it keeps our IT costs down in terms of personnel. And is enabling us to focus, as I say, on sort of those differentiators that we have within PureGymm.
Absolutely, and a lot of people would say that's the real reason for it existing, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ian, from your point of view, Ian Robinson from Accenture, you're obviously at the coalface with a lot of customers and partners. Are these examples we've had on the panel canonical?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing we're seeing from Accenture's perspective is actually it is intended to be transformational. But actually 2/3 of sort of heavy adopters of cloud have actually reported not getting the benefits they originally intended from the cloud. So it's actually, the intent is there, and I think legacy is a huge part of that and the migration. And it's not just lift and shift of servers to a data center, it's around the application, it's around the people, around the process. But looking at why people are struggling with the transformation, there's a couple of key themes emerging. There's definitely skills in the new operating model of working. There's the legacy applications. There's also then the new ways of working and upskilling, and then having the ability to have that in a secure model. And security seems to be a huge factor across all industries, right? Because you're not owning the data, and then that gets exacerbated as you move up the stack away from not just the lift and shift into the apps, the DevOps, the DevSecOps, and then when you get that right. In theory, that's where the transformation can be enabled. So I think looking at how, the cloud providers, how they help that transformation be lower risk, more secure, and done at speed, is a utopia.
That feeling of disappointment among a subset of users, at least, that you described, do you think that an example of the IT industry maybe selling everyone yet another silver bullet, a little bit over-promised?
Never in the IT industry.
No. You have a slight bias potentially, yeah, but is there a feeling that, the marketing and the hype maybe ran away a little bit from reality? Anybody?
Yeah, I think the concept of sort of cloud first. I think it's using it where it can really make a difference. So for established companies, we can use the advantages that you've got in PureGymm with your greenfield site when we're starting greenfield businesses. In Johnson Matthey, we provide industrial catalysts as one part of our business. So we're developing, turning products into a service, using data from customers, pulling that back in so they can optimize how they use their catalysts, so we can optimize the renewal and the performance. And we've been able, we've used the cloud to build that very, very quickly. Similarly, we've got a plant in Macedonia that we put analytics in. So we've used AWS and its cloud and its built-in services and tool sets, which are excellent. And that's enabled us to get there much, much faster. So, I think, even large corporates, if you know what you're aiming at, you can really access that speed.
I think that's, sorry, am I allowed to
please
interrupt?
do, yes. much better.
I think that's where some of the big gains have been for me.
Yeah.
So in the data space, you just couldn't really afford to do it on premise. And actually, the cost of cloud is, I'm sure, a discussion we'll have. But I think actually the ability to spin up and do very large data set analytics and data science is great for companies.
Yeah.
And so I think that actually the cost of, I completely get the cost of the migration can be very painful, but actually some of those areas actually you literally just can't do. And so I think that's where we've seen a lot of benefit.
And where's the line of what you do actually take, what applications and data you do take off, and what actually you may not ever do? Is there a business case for doing everything in cloud?
No.
Sorry, it was a loaded question, I think.
No, I know. We're probably in the same place, aren't we?
We're going to be in a different.
To take a legacy on-premise system that is delivering and is working and is probably fully depreciated and fully debugged.
Yeah.
Why would you spend a lot of money to move that to the cloud? Because the net cost will probably be the same, but you've just spent a lot of money doing a migration.
And that's potentially the hype. Going back to the question you raised, it's you can't take everything over. So let me rephrase that. The business case is going to be truly compelling to take everything over into the cloud, and actually understanding how you have that two-speed IT of off-prem and so on-prem and in the cloud then complicates the operating model even more potentially. So that's where I think careful consideration needs to be made of where you go.
Well, it's risk mitigation to a certain extent, isn't it? I mean, there's a reason why IBM mainframes are still installed at most of the world's largest organizations. They're terrified of dependencies, of touching this or pushing that button or turning that thing off in case, who knows? The guy who understood it died 20 years ago.
They're all the time. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think security comes into it as well. So with on-premise, people know where their servers are and they feel comfortable. They've got an IT team that are very experienced. They really understand them. I think one of the challenges that people have is that, well, I'm going to be putting my most important IP in there. Therefore, I want to make sure that I've got full control. But so we host our documents in Box, which has 256-bit security. And it's really been a paradigm shift for our business because we can access our documents on any device, anywhere we are. We've got people that work remotely. We've got people that go overseas. They can access their data in exactly the same way as they have done if they were in the office. And it's really created that flexibility and freedom within the company with the security as well. So I think that's come into play.
Security is a very interesting one, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you could say, well, putting the data in there is a bit like putting your money in the bank. It's safer, certainly in theory. They know how to protect it. They've got all these lines of defense. On the other hand, the number one fear over and over and over again is that line security/data protection privacy. Is that still a concern generally that you see?
Yeah, I think it's with our board, cybersecurity is one of the topics that we talk about regularly. I think with most corporations, especially with GDPR, there is a big focus on security, so that if we can make sure that our customers have the confidence in us that we are looking after their data well and our own data well and our staff, and we're looking after all of that sort of things, then I think it is really important and beneficial.
Yeah, it's not optional. Security is not optional. It's it's not even a nice to have. It's mandatory that if you don't get it right, and imagine the impact on the business with your customer data is impacted, let alone your operational data. So getting that right is imperative.
But is it a bit of a frustration that people out there, maybe the purse holders in particular, still equate cloud with potential for risk, or we can't touch it and feel it, that kind of server huggers, some say.
Server huggers.
So I got Amazon to come in one time and talk through their security procedures and what they do. And actually, by the end of it, everyone was like,
I'm convinced.
Right, okay. Because obviously they put an awful amount of investment into those areas, much more than we could as a company. And then fundamentally, in my experience, a lot of security risk comes through human error. And you get that in cloud environments or on-premise. And so actually there's an awful lot that, it sits outside exactly where your systems are sat. And so I think that you just need to be really clear about where the risks really are as opposed to the perceived risks.
Yeah, and I think a couple of phases in the whole journey to cloud, as that was evolving, there were rightly fears around that. But as you said, humans are usually the place the errors get interjected. Cloud, it's the journey in cloud now. So actually now it is all automated and machine led. The chance of that happening is lower. And I actually think security, whilst it's a mandatory aspect, I don't think it is as scary as it was maybe 5-10 years ago.
It's a shared risk though. I mean, I think the cloud vendors like AWS are at pains to say, hey, it's not all on us. You have to keep your side of the bargain instead of user credentials, identity management, etc.
Definitely.
Yeah. Let's move on to a second point, which is, although there are all of these softer, lovely advantages of cloud, I know a lot of CIOs and CFOs especially who signed off because they really felt it was a fundamental new price point, or at least with cost arbitrage, that you had a lower entry point and you could spread the costs and they'd be predictable. All of these things that are fascinating to accountants, they say. Do you feel that was an oversell? And do you think really the advantage of cloud is more in operational improvements, agility, etc., rather than cost? Anybody? Christina, you're nodding.
So I think it's a really tough one. I think if you look at, obviously there are benefits that cloud brings in terms of the cost, and if you look at the amount we give to the cloud providers, if you look at a company like News Corporation and the deals that we sign with them, I mean, they're huge. They're multi-millions, which all companies have. And so I think that there's that side of it. There's the fact that cloud resource, and people understand cloud is a really expensive resource, which also is very difficult to get. So you often end up using consultancies or expensive contractors. And so you have to look at it holistically. And I think that, so in my view, cloud has brought many, many benefits, but cost is not one of them. And the other issue we have in many companies is that it's moved from OPEX to CAPEX, from CAPEX to OPEX, the other way around. And so financially, sometimes that's an issue. And so I think that for me, I don't believe that it's a cost saving from what I've seen. It's not to say that there aren't cost savings enabled by cloud, because actually operationally you should be able to make your business more efficient. But the actual like for like on-premise versus cloud, I don't think.
It's absolutely my experience as well. We used Salesforce. We're going on to Workday. We use Azure and AWS. It doesn't turn out to be cheaper, and that's not the reason for doing it. It's really important to cost it out and make sure that the business owners of that service, understand that that's what they're letting themselves and the corporation in for. The reasons for going to the cloud are agility and speed to market and scalability, and that ability to turn on services very, very quickly.
But what about when you made that initial ROI calculation and you persuaded the board to hand over hard cash? is there a disappointment that there hasn't been a tangible cost saving at that level, or you feel like you went into it with your eyes wide open?
We tried to go. It was really, here's the good news. You haven't got a sort of 5 or 10 million upfront capital. We can do it much faster. And here's the bad news. You're on the clock, and you need to recognise you're on the clock in terms of sort of transaction charges, and that's something you've got to sort of watch. Very, very carefully. Now, I think certainly the AWS and Azure that we deal with are offering the capability to centrally meter cloud usage across the organization, because lots of things spring up all over the place. So the ability to do that and ensure that you've tagged all services, and also you can put a upper limit, spending limit. The danger with this is you're kind of treating your customers rather like disobedient. So you're disobedient children. You can only, that's your pocket money. But certainly you get big marks from the CFO on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think when it comes to cost, there's a big it depends, especially with software engineering and hosting your own websites, because what we found at PureGymm is it really depends on how you're utilizing the in-cloud services that you've got access to. And if you think about the amount of caching that you want to perform, you can really reduce the amount of throughput that you got on your servers. If you write really efficient code, you need fewer instances in the cloud as well, which could impact your costs. And a good example is where we moved from a third party that developed our website to us doing it in-house. We actually halved the costs when we went into the cloud. So I think there is a big it depends on this, because if the code that was written and that was hosted on-prem isn't very well written and efficient, then it's obviously going to need a lot more tin than if you write really efficient code and hosting it yourself in the cloud. So I think I totally take on board with other instances that we've got here, but I think as long as you are really mindful of the costs for the cloud and the transaction cost, then I think it does make a difference.
The model now is, for the CFO, is no surprises. So whereas before there was like how your costs are made up on-prem, as you said, there's an infrastructure, there's an application, there's a data, whatever, and people do that. Now it's accounted for in a different way. So actually, it could, to your model, it could go out of control, even if you've got your metering on, if it's not well managed, and that's around the new ways of working. I think that's a transformational bit, right? Going right back to the first question, getting that right in the new way of working means you can, whether it be cloud native apps to be disruptive, speed to market, or something else. But you can also let people go wild and play with this, and that's the recipe for increased costs. So I think no surprises are going to be the mantra for the CFO.
But some of it is also linked to how successful you are as a company as well. So
course,
for us, the more traffic we can get,
it's a good thing. It's a good thing, yeah.
But actually does come, in terms of some hosting costs. So actually, people understanding that relationship and realising that there's a
different set of parameters, yeah.
And the other thing, it's important to sort of ensure that your sort of business colleagues and sponsors understand that you're on the upgrade treadmill.
Yeah.
So, Salesforce are going to be putting in sort of releases and, Workday every 6 months. It's all great stuff, but you've got to stay on the core path. And you can't get off that. And that has a continuing cost that people have got to be there. It's not a question of, well, I don't want that functionality. Well, you may, 6 months, you may, but you're going to have to take it, because that's what you bought into. And it's a very different sort of model.
Let me ask you, Paul, because you're the former CIO at British Airways and John Lewis, and you've seen a lot of these things come and go in your time in the business. From your point of view, does it make the CIO role more important? Does it enable significantly? Does it encourage better relationships with C-suite and board level executives, or are you trading a maintenance tax for bill shock or different problems for other problems?
I think it's part of what we all have to do, which is engage with the business and against the kind of tidal waves of marketing that comes in, and the noise on that is probably the loudest it's ever been. So every board is really worried about digital challenges, is thinking about digital transformation, how to start new products and services. So I think the CIO role is much more central because digital technology is much more central. And the cloud kind of fits into that, which is, what you try to do is demythologize it, and say, look, this is a really useful thing. We can, it's going to enable us to do these really great things with, analytics in Macedonia, or starting formaldehyde as a service, as a new product. But we're not about to move all the IT that we've got onto it. Let's understand that. So it's one of those things that you've got to explain to your colleagues in plain English, really.
Yeah, and I wonder from your point of view, Dan, as a CIO with that joy of a greenfield site and a blank sheet of paper, do you feel, oh my goodness, I'm never ever going to go into one of these companies with a bit of this and a bit of that and try to figure out this legacy? Do you feel you're a cloud first guy for life now and you'd like to have that joy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the quick answer to that is yes.
It does sound
no
good.
jobs going on.
Yeah. But I can see the benefit. I mean, I've worked in both, right? I've experienced what it's like when I was at Wiggle. I was there for about 4.5, 5 years. That was all on-prem, and then it was sort of hosted services. And we needed to continuously patch those servers and keep them up to date. And with having a big estate as well, it's quite hard to keep on top of all of that and know exactly where everything is. Moving into the cloud, all of that's looked after for us. So we use Microsoft Azure, and it affords us that real benefit. But to the point Paul was making, that it's all about how you educate your senior team. If your CEO understands the benefit of the cloud and can really sort of see, we talked about the security elements earlier, but seeing all of those things and getting that wide picture and where the benefit is and those cost savings that you could get through personnel and the simplification that you get of moving into the cloud means that for my job, what I try to do selfishly is make my job as easy as possible. So if I can outsource any hygiene factors and ensure that we, as an IT team, create those differentiators, then that means that my world's a lot more simple. There's fewer things that go wrong. And I've definitely seen over the last 6 months, the stability that we've got in Microsoft has improved significantly, to the fact that we've had zero downtime in the last 5 months, which is really unusual with the cloud. If you go back a couple of years, it definitely wasn't that stable then. So we're definitely seeing a maturation within the cloud coming through as well, which I think is making me feel that if I went into a business into the future and it was on-prem, I would significantly be looking at moving into the cloud in a sensible way, obviously, but for me, it's at a mature level that makes it a good choice, I think.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about maturity. How far along the line would you say we are? As I said, it's not a new thing anymore, is it? It was the last century when people started putting this stuff in. What remains to be done, would you say?
Well, I mean, it goes back to that. We're not journey to cloud anymore. It's now the journey in cloud, and then maybe like trademark that phrase. But I mean, one of the stats, like 40% of Black Friday's transactions in the US were done on mobile, which was all cloud enabled, and there were no transactional issues or defects. I mean, that's a huge data set and a huge consumer impact. So that suggests to me that from a technology perspective, it's pretty mature and pretty stable, as you said, and pretty well understood. I think looking forward, what else is to come? I mean, if you look at the rate of development of AWS, of Azure, of even GCP, Google, I mean, they are developing and issuing 2,000-3,000 new services a year, and that's their core native cloud services. So there's the rate of development isn't slowing down. I think where the maturity comes from is actually from a business perspective. of how those businesses best take advantage of the technology and drive new differentiators, new products and services, and actually how they use the technology to enable the business outcome. And that's where people, I think, are still developing. And again, different sectors and different industries have different products and service drivers there. But I think that's where I believe the cloud providers are going to be investing their time and energy to help customers do that better and faster and cheaper. We've got a stable, well understood, set of technology components there. How we best use them in our businesses is going to be the way forward.
Where we are going to invest is the obvious place, which is where we can develop new services and products, optimize existing ones, which will help our customers and improve the bottom line. So that's where we'll be going for, new cloud capabilities. It's not a big priority to migrate the old stuff. As the cloud providers get better at that, and if they're able to lift and shift, that's the first bit without major disruption, and then provide it convincingly at a price point, then okay, we might consider that. But the new development absolutely is going to be built in the cloud, and we'll sort of do that. But for the rest, I think we're going to be hybrid. And talking to a lot of CIOs, I mean that's what I get back.
Yeah.
They see hybrid
Yeah.
just because there isn't an operational or cost driver to move.
Yeah.
So we're out of our data centres by this time next year. So we will have moved everything to cloud, and we've been on that path for quite a long time. And really now the last things are the slightly trickier things to do, which are the last mile. But for us, we found that actually the more and more we shifted, the more expensive our data centre became because the footprint was smaller. And so actually, it makes complete sense. And then in terms of, you made a point about mobility, I mean, that's huge. And we were caught up with the London Bridge terror attack the first time. We were caught up with the incident on Friday, and actually being able to have a mobile workforce as well as attracting new talent is really important to the organisation. And so cloud plays obviously a really important
and still
part
get the
of
paper
that.
out on time and the digital edition out on time without any service impact.
And so there are other considerations beyond just the cost of moving, but we're so far down the path, it's just getting the last bit done.
Well, from my point of view, I think where we're going to see things moved to, we're currently hosting in Ireland at the moment, and in the Netherlands as well. We want to move into England, but what we're seeing is that not all of the service capability have moved across yet. And I think that's quite natural, that not all of the systems are moved across by, say, Microsoft, for example, or AWS. So I think where we're going to see it is the services that are provided are going to be sort of migrated across internationally. But we're starting to utilise more computational power in the cloud, leveraging cognitive services and that sort of thing. So one of the things that's quite interesting to me is to see how machine learning can be done in the cloud, because it requires a significant amount of computational power, but it's cheap. And to build those sort of services up on premise would be prohibitively expensive for us to do. But we're able to do some quite exciting things. One of the things that's quite interesting to me is image recognition. And you see a lot of this with DeepMind are doing a lot of work on this at the moment. From my viewpoint, a use case could be that someone goes into the gym with their mobile app, they take a photograph of a piece of equipment they don't really recognize. Machine learning recognizes what that image is, identifies potential workouts you could do on that piece of equipment, and potentially sets up a fitness plan that they could carry out. So there are real world benefits of utilizing that computational power. Another one is chatbots. Seeing a lot of press about that at the moment. That's becoming at a mature level, not just on text, but also these chatbots answering the phone and taking calls, which means that one of the business benefits with that is that you need fewer people in your customer service team, because you are getting, say, 80% of the calls dealt with by a machine, which means that as your business grows, you don't need to grow out your customer service team, which obviously has a direct impact on EBITDA within the business.
I mean, a lot of the excitement is going to be enabled by this sort of thing. So, like you with analytics, we're trying to develop concept of citizen data scientists. So, basically, take the AWS sort of data lake, put all sorts of data from across the company, and make sure it's locked down so they can't do any damage, or can't export it, or can't, and then with reasonably basic amounts of sort of training in the tool sets, people can start actually using that. They don't need the intermediary of a BI function in order to sit there, to do that. So I think that that sort of flexibility and access to that, opens up whole new areas.
Those people doing that on the fly sort of developments are in the business and not in a big IT function as well.
Absolutely.
So it's a very that's going to drive up efficiency in
exactly, and equipping your people to do that, and we're doing some proofs of concept, like lots of folks, in terms of robotics and working with automation anywhere, and again, you can very quickly spin up proofs of concept and do that, and if you want to scale, then you can. But remember, you're on the clock, as I said before.
Absolutely. Never forget. I do wonder whether one potential challenge is that multi-cloud management, as some people call it now, the fact that you might say Google DeepMind for AI-related tasks, you might say Microsoft because I've got a lot of Microsoft tooling and infrastructure, Amazon because it's absolutely enormous, AWS, and then sooner or later you're going to try and say, what about, I want to be able to look at all of these at once and even move a workload from one to the other. How far do you think we've come on that? Anybody?
Well,
not far enough.
Yeah.
I mean, from my point, I always had a dream, and I set the team the challenge. I think 3 years would be to be cloud agnostic, and it was more to play the providers off in terms of cost, to be honest. And we've been trying to look at that, but it just becomes really difficult. You do find that AWS has this particular functionality that you want to use, and you get locked in.
Yeah.
And so actually the ability to switch between cloud providers becomes actually pretty difficult. So we certainly haven't cracked it. It's still a dream of mine that you would be able to just go, okay, right, let's just switch between. But if someone else has cracked that, let me know.
So again, the data points that sort of resonate in my mind is from, and I think this is some Gartner research, and Tech Republic research, I think some Accenture research, but 2/3 of organizations are saying they want a hybrid, they are going to be for a hybrid environment. That's just not just on-prem and a cloud provider, it's a multi-tenant. So 2 cloud providers and plus on-prem. 2/3 of them have said they're going to do it in the next 18 months, and 2/3 of those companies have not got a plan of how to do it because it's not been done. So there's a huge intent there.
But that's having cloud providers for different things.
Well, yeah.
I wanted to just be able to flick a switch and
load balance between the two.
Well,
right.
and you're going to, and you're going to have to really, if it was a website, externally facing, you're really going to have to watch the latencies. Yeah. If you're pulling different services, architecturally feasible, but in practice,
turning up and down the volume depending on.
And if one of those providers is having a little bit of slow, watch out for that. So I think you've got to be really careful. I kind of got over that bit, in terms of we could use AWS, but if you don't use the tool set, you're not going to get the full benefit. No. If you do use the tool set, hey, guess what? Those apps you build, you're going to be pretty locked in on them. So we kind of took a deep breath and thought, well, we want the full functionality.
It's interesting. Last night I talked about latency. I don't know if any of you watched Amazon Prime's football coverage for the first time ever. A good 15 seconds behind real time. I mean, we're used to that little 2-second delay with digital. But
was it that much, right?
Well, I believe that was the quote.
So you heard outside shouting goal, and you hadn't seen it yet.
Well, these days the second screen thing, where everyone's going, that was a good goal. So it hasn't happened yet. Get a bet on quick. Or sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just so one of the things that we are challenged by in my business, because we do national TV advertising campaigns. We get a significant amount of volume visitors come through on our website when an ad appears. And I remember we went onto TV when I was at Wiggle, and one of the things that we had to do was spend literally months creating these tin servers in our data center in order to be able to deal with that load. And then they're just sort of sat there. But now with the cloud, because we are able to effectively tune the amount of servers that we've got, and because of the lower costs, we've been able to carry out load testing and create identical environments in what we call our Gamma build, which means that we can effectively synthesize the same amount of traffic that you get with a big advert that appears, see how our systems behave, get it tuned just right so that we increase the number of servers that we've got. And then now I can go into our peak period, which, as you can imagine, is after everyone's overindulged over Christmas. So January, we're expecting quite a few.
Big rush,
absolutely.
Right over there,
and you can be really elastic with it. And you can, with a couple of clicks of the mouse, you can add on new servers that can take that additional load. You can do it elastically as well. So you can set sort of min and max numbers, and it can automatically add servers as and when required. And these are things that you just simply couldn't do before with on-premise. You had to make that massive expense, get all these additional servers that effectively are redundant for most of the time.
Software licenses also,
yeah,
potentially.
Absolutely. There's huge cost involved with that.
And the good news is you can decommission them at about January the 6th, because none of us ever go back after that. but look, I think we've got about 10 minutes, if that's right. So two more questions I'd love to get through, and then if I've missed one, shout out. But you know, you talked about it, Paul. You said about lift and shift and re-platforming and making that gradual move from on-prem to cloud is a very strategic and tactical maneuver you have to make. What to move, how to move it, when, why, what will it cost, etc. Any tips and tricks for re-platforming from moving from old world to new world? Did you come across any magical things, or are you going to keep them to yourself because they're so valuable? Anybody? We can skip that question if it's really boring.
Well, you've done it. I guess you're nearly all the way there.
Well, I was trying to think it really is a case-by-case basis, because I think sometimes you look at it and you think, actually, we want to completely engineer this to work in the cloud. In other cases, actually, we're moving quite legacy, and we're just like, okay, we just need to move it. Yeah. And actually, once it's there, we'll see if we can optimize it. But actually, in the first instance, we just want to move it. And sometimes with the optimization comes workflow changes as well for the business. And so I think that it really just depends. But the more you can improve as you move, the better, obviously, but it's just not always possible.
Yeah, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all answer to that question. And I guess there are some generic services that you move, and that is the lift and shift, but that's not where the value is. So depending on what's mission critical, where your data sits, what apps you use as your business from the front line, and how they impact your bottom line is surely the focus. I think it's a bit of a moving target. I think depending on how, one thing I say is there are organisations that are heavy users of cloud and are all in, and that might be a different decision to the lighter users of cloud, you know, who may just be doing things maybe for wage arbitrage or cost arbitrage. But you know, if you're all in, I think that's a very different answer to
And also, I wouldn't underestimate the amount of cultural change you need to do.
Completely.
So it's actually within your teams, because you're moving from your sort of traditional IT team to DevOps and everything else.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think that's a really big thing to do. And so actually, you have to think really hard about how you're going to achieve that, or else you end up with the sort of, okay, we have a whole load of people over here, but they don't really have the skills to manage
They're not relevant to
this thing over here.
World, yeah.
And I think if you think how it sort of plays with your colleagues and the rest of the business, I mean, in Johnson Matthey, we've got a lot of demand in order to, you know, enable the business to change and move forward, develop new products, understand our data, you know, improve our productivity, build new plants around the world. If I sort of spend the effort on moving things to the cloud for, a potential sort of reasonably small net saving, and require the business to go offline for a weekend while I'm doing it, they're going to sort of question whether, I'm really doing what they need. So I'd rather put it at the exciting bits, the new business bits, rather than the old.
lessons learned then? Ideally, I keep asking this, no one does the second of these two parts, but lessons learned, things you did successfully, anything where you made a bit of a proud of yourself and you think, I certainly wouldn't do that again. More people were keen on number one here.
I think,
but,
so back in 2015, when I joined PureGymm, I was looking forward to putting the cloud in. And I think we took the decision to do continuous deployment and delivery on that. And I think the good decision that we made there was knowing what that end goal was going to be and having a clear line of sight to that, which enabled us to really think about the environments that we wanted to create and get it set up. It's only now that we are effectively scripting all of those server builds. So one of the challenges that we have with creating similar environments is that there's still some manual steps involved with that. But effectively codifying all of those system setups is going to really benefit us further in that. But as I see, it's always a bit of a moving feast. I'm very pleased with the fact that we've chosen to go into the cloud. I think that was one of the better sort of business decisions that I've made.
Christina?
I would say I've probably underestimated, you're so focused on the getting to the cloud, you probably underestimate the continued amount of development, evolution that is required, because obviously the cloud isn't a static thing that you go, okay, we're there.
On, off, yeah.
It's constantly changing, and one day there's this tool, the next day there's that tool, and actually you have to be prepared to invest in the people and the tools to actually continue to get value out of it. And I think that a lot of us are so focused just in getting there in the first place that we kind of forget about the ongoing investment that's going to be required. Yeah,
absolutely. Paul?
I think, just looking back, explain more, because we kind of live it, it's sort of easy to sort of assume that things that kind of seem self-evident, absolutely not. So explaining why, if you go to the cloud, it take the next 5 years, it probably almost certainly won't be cheaper, maybe the same, but it will have the advantages that we've talked about in terms of speed. Explain that they are going to be releases. If you're on a cloud service, and that's a different model, so you've got to be ready for that. That has its benefits, but you're there, but you're also on the clock. And then explain to the folks that you're not going to be moving why it actually is best for the business in terms of it's a stable system, it's doing what we want it to do, and it's fully depreciated. Maybe it isn't the easiest thing in the world to connect to, but this is not the place to to go sort of moving it to the cloud for what really won't make fundamental difference to your business. Wouldn't you prefer that I helped you with your analytics on this bit? So I think it's that old lesson of you can't under engage with your business partner.
Can I ask you one follow-up with that, Paul? Because everyone talks about communicating, of course they do, but any successful tactics you've had? I know a lot of CIOs who've said, it's really important you build intimacy to the point that, maybe you can go and have a drink afterwards with the CEO or the CFO, that kind of human relationship, or building virtual teams at times, or having, excellent communications media and really constantly talking to the whole group and having breakout pizza sessions or whatever it is. Is there anything that really works for you, or is there no silver dollar?
I always wish I could, do it better. And I think you're probably right. It's conditioned by the organisation you're in, and what the culture of that is, and trying to lock into that. I mean, I'm sort of fortunate to be amidst lots of very, very smart scientists, who are sort of really pushing the boundaries in materials science, battery materials, and how chemistry works, and how we develop new solutions. So what I'm trying to do is to talk to them about how things digital can really help these. And indeed, actually, if being competitive in the 23rd decade of the 21st century, how we haven't talked about how you leverage cloud to do hyperscale computing and model molecular behavior at high temperatures. So it's actually talking to your colleagues about the things that really matter to your colleagues, which in my case, to a lot of them, the behavior of molecules under high temperatures and high pressure is really, really interesting. And they sort of opens that. So I think it's as always, it's trying to get onto the agenda. In John Lewis, it was actually talking about how it moves products forward, and so the more you can lock into the nature of your organisation, and I'm lucky enough to be one that I'm really passionate about, is the better, I think.
Excellent. And Dean?
Yeah, it might be a bit of a joke, but I'm looking forward to seeing formaldehyde as a service.
Oh yeah,
because
if you've got a big formaldehyde plant, you're the kind of guy we want to talk to.
But this year's point, it's not a cloud is not a technology hammer to crack a cost nut. I think the success comes from using the cloud to deliver a business service.
Yes, and
doing that better, faster, cheaper, in an engaged way. So when formaldehyde as a service is on the market, it's been built by scientists using the technology.
Scientists for scientists.
Exactly. So I think it sounds like a joke, but actually it's got to be a relevant business activity rather than a technology project. And I think everything that comes, that's why people like Accenture in business, because that's complicated and bringing it together. But when you look at that holistically and have that always in mind and never revert back when it gets tough to, it's a technology project, let's deliver it. I think those approaches will be more successful.
Great.